Ashley, I'd love to start with you as a content strategy lead with software teams at Atlassian. How do you see omnichannel practices helping with the workflow and the collaboration between digital teams, right? Different products and the content creators themselves. So is there a way to kind of create glue between those teams, those that need content and the content creators? And what do those collaborative processes look like?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. As you were talking and asking about, how do we bring together the digital team and the content creator? And I was like, those aren't actually different people in most cases. Like, again, when we go back to thinking about shipping our org chart, are you a content creator if you make the video, or if you appear on the video, or if you distribute the video? Which of those is the content creation process? Because in a lot of cases, especially with the advent of live streaming, I am all of those things. I'm producing the video, I'm the talent, and I'm also the person distributing it. So I would actually say the first step is to shift your mindset away from thinking that these are separate things. One thing Christopher was saying about the increase in traffic due to COVID and how they're struggling to keep their systems online because there's been such a huge increase in traffic. As a marketer, I need to be thinking about what does it look like on the back end when I go to my web team and I say, hey, I'm about to throw $3 million, $2 million, the world at this website. Are you cool with that? I mean, just, if I don't have it in my head that, hey, the website experience actually has to stand up to the amount of traffic I'm about to throw at it. You don't think of website traffic as a marketing problem unless you're thinking of, oh, how do I measure my entrances for my funnel? That's the whole wrong mindset. Like, yes, that's one piece of it. Same thing. I also work with a number of content designers. And so it's the same thing where we think about in product where, okay, as a marketer, I got you in, now I'm just going to throw it over the wall. Well, no, if somebody goes in product and they don't understand, agile practices. So the first question on the screen is, do you want Kanban or Scrum? That in theory is something that the content designer needs to solve. How do I display Kanban or Scrum? Okay, but if I haven't educated you on agile practices, you don't know what to choose in product. And so I would say that understanding, obviously as a marketer, I'm talking about understanding the web perspective or the UX perspective or the CD perspective. But as a content designer, how did somebody arrive to you? That's a question that they ask all the time. So if we don't talk to each other and we don't see what each other is working on, and same thing, product, right? If I don't know what features are coming and they don't know how I'm talking about the messaging of the features in the market, we're not collaborating effectively. And so I think the bigger issue is not just focusing on the skill that you use to execute, but thinking holistically from a mindset perspective about what is the customer or the user or the audience going to experience throughout their journey. So those are, I think, the big things. Workflows, there's a lot of ways that you can schedule meetings or you can schedule tasks in Jira or Trello, or you can have a Google Doc where you both comment. But if the only thing you're doing is saying, I have this skill to execute and I'm going to pair it with this one piece of content or this one channel, you've missed a huge connection there. And so whether you bring in people who are generalists, kind of like me, I act as that glue to look at those processes and look at how we connect, or you embed that as the DNA of the organization, which I think is the better way to do it. And you start thinking about that mindset shift. If you're just focused on matching skill to execution to asset or channel, you've missed the bigger picture.
So do you use journey maps? You mentioned the customer journey as the unifying theme. Do you use journey maps as a shared artifact between teams?
We do. So depending on, this is especially true as we think about, we're going to launch a new product or we're going to create new connections between certain assets or certain channels. We do use journey maps. The thing that I really like about those journey maps is we start all the way at the very beginning. So I see some journey maps that jump in with the customer lands on the website or the customer lands in product. And I'm like, you're missing a whole bunch of the journey, right? Or they end with the customer buys the product. And I'm like, again, you've missed a whole part of the journey of, okay, what happens when then they have to onboard now? What does the documentation look like? Does the documentation match whatever we told them to get them to buy the product in the first place? So I think we do a great job having comprehensive journey maps. And part of that is because we ask marketing, we ask UX, we ask product, we ask engineering, we ask content design. what is your part of the journey, so that we can then zoom out and look holistically and say, somebody heard somebody at a conference, or somebody saw something on LinkedIn, or somebody Googled something and they actually landed on the documentation first. Like, I actually kind of eschew the whole funnel model. Like, I think everything is top of funnel content at this point. I don't think that we should be mapping content to say this is an awareness piece or this is a bottom of funnel piece. Like, you could land on documentation when you Google something. What does that tell you to get you into product? So yeah, I think that the journey maps being holistic is huge.
Oh, yeah, holistic, and it sounds like comprehensive, left and right. You know, where does it start? It doesn't start at the website. You know,
Right.
They arrived there somehow. So
Right.
yeah, and that's interesting. There's a question that I'd love to follow up on with everybody when we open it up to general, which is about culture. You were talking about culture, and you know, so what is the cultural shift? And the hallmarks of that cultural shift that's really needed. Right? We can't wag the dog, but we can influence. And so, you know, kind of knowing what we're trying to influence toward is good. And I think collectively in the industry, it's good for us to kind of get a sense of that cultural mindset. Like, and so I'd love to dive into that. Well, thank you. I appreciate that insight. You know, Christopher, as team manager for the WHO, especially during this year, you've had to get a lot of information at the right time to the right people, and so there's a time pressure, right? Because the COVID isn't waiting for anybody, and the information about COVID from authority needs to come out at a certain time. So time is a real factor, and you know, I'm really curious how the pressure of this last year has influenced the digital team's approach, and what kinds of things you found have been successful for in the middle of that, you know, time-sensitive environment, getting relevant and timely information out the door across channels.
Great, yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, one thing we're very, very good at WHO is credible and trusted information and getting it out there. Not as good on the timely manner because it's very scientific. So they really check through the science very methodically. So we're often beaten by other people in terms of getting numbers out the door. And I have to say, I'm very proud of what the entire organization did this year in terms of speeding up the processes and getting it out in a very timely and actionable way. It's a whole balancing act, really. So while we're pumping out huge amounts of content, every team in WHO wants to be part of the COVID thing because it's everything in the world. We're all stuck at home, just basically trying to figure this thing out. So every team, whether it's maternal and child health, is saying, how are children impacted by COVID? How are mothers impacted by COVID? How about people with tuberculosis? How are they impacted by COVID? So every medical field is trying to go through and ride the COVID wave. So really what we're trying to balance is, on the one hand, having so much information just coming through onto the website, coming through onto like 5 or 6 new standalone channels. And then I'm having my team trying to plug in the piping so it all flows seamlessly. I mean, basically, because we're mainly quantity driven historically, you're pushing more and more quantity. But once you get 1.4 billion people on your site in a year, I don't know what you want more than that, but we're still talking, we want more people, we want more people. So how many times a day do they have to come? And I can tell you, located in Switzerland, given the vaccine hesitancy of some people, we're not even swaying our own market in the place where our headquarters is located. So it's not just about the quantity, it's also about getting it to the right people in the right markets. And basically, luckily the CMS we chose is a headless CMS. So we were linking up, creating the APIs, linking them all up, linking up our, to give you another example, we had our dashboard with all the countries and all the COVID cases and all the COVID deaths. And now it's who's taking what vaccines, how many vaccines are out there. We had 2 teams competing on it. And what the team that lost out was really despondent, upset, depressed. We did all this work. We didn't know there was this other team. So we took that and we put that onto more of the apps. or the bots. And so it's linked in, so every country, people can go in and play with those numbers and see how it's trending over time. So it's really about getting the information in the right language, to the right region. And that's really what we focused heavily on, is trying to do that. At the same time, just trying to keep up with everything. It's almost like being in a washing machine where so much is happening that you're just trying to keep on top of the key elements of what you're working on. And so for me, that's really been, is to try to make it more omnichannel. I would say we're really in the early stages of omnichannel. We have some systems that are super connected. And as soon as a content appears, it goes through 3 or 4 channels. And then, as I said, we have these other ones where we're like, what is that thing? And how do we deal with that thing? Because of course, if you've hired a company to build it, and they're the only ones who can update the content, well, you just stated the problem in the beginning. If our guidance changes on, let's say, masks, at the beginning, masks were less prevalent. All of a sudden, we're saying masks everybody needs to wear. And you're on a system where you need to call somebody who's in a different time zone and sleeping, and they need to change it. It's not going to be that fast. It's not going to be that timely. So we've been playing with this balance, and sometimes we're getting it right. Often we're getting it right, but then sometimes it's painful because you just feel like you're a step or 2 behind in the game. So I mean, I think we've done well in it, but I think we still have places we can do even better.
There's a lot to dig into here, and I know we won't have time to, but the piping you're talking about is, and the headless systems, you're really addressing speed in some technical ways. There's also, I'm sure, implied some process changes that you've had to weather over the last year. Can you give us a sense of sort of the highest impact deltas for speed? Has it been moving to content as a service and headless, or are there any other sort of big impacts that have moved the needle in terms of getting content out to market?
I think a big change that happened is the data team started to create a data lake. So there was a massive amount of investment there, which was really well needed and really well overdue. Because obviously, as you can see, with numbers like COVID deaths, COVID cases, but just any number of cases for any number of diseases is very important. And it was, that is something that on our systems has been difficult to deal with, just because, let's say you're talking about alcohol, people taking too much alcohol, and you're looking in a country like, we'll take Sweden, and you're looking in a demographic from age like 25 to 35. To drill down to that data is very, very tricky, but we've had a lot of investment both in the data lake and then in some key search functionality with people like Yext who enable it to be customer questions that go in and people find exactly what they're looking for. So to me, that's one of the biggest shifts. I've been involved basically in terms of giving them the guidance, giving them the strategic direction. And thankfully, they've been taking a lot of it on board. And they've also had a lot of money that has come into it. So that, to me, that's been the biggest change. The second thing is, yes, dealing with all that content and having a more of an omni-channel system has cleaned it up a bit.
Interesting. Yeah, data as content is there's probably a whole roundtable we could do just about that, right? Because I'm sure all of us have dealt with different forms of data that could be used as content if properly curated, managed, and made available to content form. It sounds like you've addressed a lot of that this last year. It's very interesting that was your number one.